Good morning. My name is Twa-le Abrahamson. I'm a member of the Spokane Tribe and appreciate everybody for being here this morning and the powerful words that were spoken to open up our minds and our hearts as we listen to some of the issues that our community members are facing. I'm excited today to moderate this panel on Indigenous perspectives and actions, and we have an expert panel on especially tribal natural resource issues. So appreciate our speakers for being here today. We'll share some of the issues that our reservations and our waterways are facing, and some of the work that is being done on behalf of our future generations. So thank everyone for being here this morning, and I'll let the presenters kind of introduce themselves. You have a bio in the packets, but if there's something that's missing, you can definitely say that as well. Thank you.
My name is Caj Matheson. I'm a member of the Coeur d'Alene Tribe. I currently serve as the Director of Natural Resources for the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and I also serve on our tribal council as well. I also happen to serve as the second Vice President for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, the regional consortium of tribes in the Northwest. Nothing special about me. I grew up in this area. My family was all raised here. All my extended family, like most Native folks that have grown up around here, we all kind of grew up around our cousins and aunts and uncles, grandmas, what have you. And that's true also of me and my family and my kids. And we still are around and enjoy the area in so many of the same ways that everybody else does. For us, some of the key issues really have been centered around Coeur d'Alene Lake, a little bit in Hangman Creek too, as well as we start thinking about salmon passage moving forward. But that's kind of been our focus. And that's me.
Good morning. Margo Hill Ferguson, good morning. We're pleased to be here to visit with you a little bit about our priorities and some of the unique issues that we deal with as tribal communities. I'm a Spokane tribal citizen, a Coeur d'Alene descent. I grew up on the Spokane Indian Reservation out in Welpinit. I served as our attorney for a decade, and currently I serve as a professor of urban and regional planning. I also got a master's of urban and regional planning in addition to my Juris Doctorate, and I'm also director of American Indian Studies. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm honored to be here with you this morning. My name is DR Michel. I'm a citizen of the Twa-le Tribe, and I'm currently the executive director of the Upper Columbia United Tribes. We'll get in a little more of the details of who we are and some of the things we're working on as we go through, but I'm just real happy to be here with you today, and I look forward to sharing with you some of the opportunities we have going forward. So, thank you.
You want to start? Okay, since they have my slide up. They have my slides up, so I was going to have Kosh go first. Next slide, please. So you don't always see us, but we're here. This is my grandmother and great-grandmother and my great-grandfather, Basil Pion, Sadie Boyd, Ida. Tribal people are here living in your community. I live in North Spokane, and we have issues in our urban tribal communities, if it's the American Indian Community Center, or in our reservation tribal communities. We're highly mobile. We are out in our tribal communities. I was on the Colville Indian Reservation, Omak, in Nispelem last weekend. I was in Inchalim last night. We're very connected to our tribal lands, and our scientists and our tribal leaders are working very hard to fight for the environment. And I'm just going to share a few successes. Next slide, please. We continue to fight addiction in our tribal communities. There's a number of Senate bills and different issues that we've been successful over the past year, and I just want to recognize Deborah Leekenoff. She's a state representative, and in partnership with the American Indian Health Commission, we've been working hard. Many of our communities, all here in Spokane, are dealing with issues of fentanyl. Next slide, please. So we've been successful at health equity issues, and really prioritizing this collaboration, the sovereignty of tribes, in addition to working with local jurisdictions, helps all of our communities. Next slide. So there's been some strategic partnerships, with getting treatment and behavioral health, that we've really been successful. And I just wanted to highlight that in cooperation, it's helping all of our communities. Go ahead, next slide. So unfortunately, we still continue to have some fatalities on our reservations. This is one of my nieces, Nika Stensgar. She had gone to treatment, was working, was on the west side doing really well. But unfortunately, we still have drug dealers and gangs that come into our tribal communities because of the jurisdictional issues. And I'm going to share a little bit with you today about our jurisdictional issues. But I always want to mention my niece, Nika. She passed away. A drug dealer gave her drugs, and she had been doing so well, starting a new job the next day, and she passed away. Next slide, please. We are doing some innovative things. The U.S. Attorney's Office, we're very thankful. Vanessa Waldriff worked so hard to get additional U.S. attorneys. We have real challenges fighting drug dealers in our tribal communities because our authority over non-natives is taken under case law and U.S. Supreme Court decisions, so it makes it very challenging. Drug dealers think they can come in, but we worked on the Caldwell Indian Reservation with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Division of Drug Enforcement, and other tribes to stop these drug dealers, and we seized a large amount. It was the combined efforts of state, local, and tribal that got these narcotics off the reservation. Next slide, please. So again, a few bills I just want to mention. Senate Bill 5060, it's law enforcement hiring grant program for the purpose of providing direct support to local and tribal law enforcement. The goal of the bill is to help fill vacancies within local and tribal law enforcement. In our tribal communities, we really have a shortage of law enforcement. At my tribe, we don't have a lot of money, and so often our officers are hired away to the county or to another jurisdiction that has more funds. So it's hard to keep, and we have some of the highest trained law enforcement. We send our tribal police to FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Academy in Arcadia, New Mexico. So this bill is real important to support tribal law enforcement. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show this picture. This is a picture of a typical reservation. This is the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation. But all of the different colors is when I'm an urban planning professor, so when I ask people, what does this look like? They say, oh, that looks like a zoning map. But really, in fact, this is a jurisdictional map. And this is nothing that tribes asked for. We didn't ask for, the different status of land. So in the gold, you see the fee land. Then there's blue is tribal trust. But our reservation's what called checkerboarded. So we have non-Indians and sometimes bad actors that come into the reservation, and it makes it real hard for us to enforce, police provisions, and so people think that it's a place, there's a vacuum of police jurisdiction, and so they come into the reservation, and it's even an issue for our natural resources, regulating folks that are dumping and polluting our waters. But this is a typical checkerboard reservation. It makes it real hard for us to provide law enforcement. Next slide. So for tribal communities, we have to rely on our federal partners, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute, because if it's a non-native, we can't prosecute major crimes like murder, rape, and arson. We have to depend upon our federal partners, like the U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI. So it's real hard. It depends on the land status, it depends on the crime, and it depends on the perpetrator. Next slide, please. So there's been some real success in cooperation with tribal justice systems, and the state of Washington really has a shared interest in public safety. So we just want to work together to make sure that all of our agencies, law enforcement agencies, are supported and working to fight these bad actors and perpetrators. Next slide, please. So there's been some successful initiatives, funding of fentanyl prevention, as well as tribal schools, and some support of our treatment facilities. Next slide. And I apologize for going so quickly, but I will definitely get the list of bills to Mary. Tribal transportation, it's important for tribes to have representation. We are often the largest employer in our counties in our region, and so this gives tribes a seat at the table. Next slide, please. Senate Bill 5301, again, it extends governmental services into tribal communities. Sometimes the public facilities and utilities, it can be a challenge connecting. So this just makes clear under the Growth Management Act that tribes are also part of those that are able to be served. For example, on the west side, I'm blanking, but we have tribal treatment facilities and healthcare facilities that serve non-natives as well as natives. And so I think it's that partnership to provide those services that really help. Next slide. Senate Bill 510, it's a tuition waiver for tribal elders that can go to the community colleges. And next slide, last slide, please. That's my last slide. And I just want to mention a couple others. There's a criminal justice bill, juvenile points legislation, and I'll share the information with Mary. And then we have ongoing fights for water, for people versus fish. Our tribal communities are working really hard to bring salmon back to our waterways. And salmon, we need fast, cold cleaning water, and that's good for everyone, right? Our river is connected to our aquifer. That's all of our drinking waters, and we need salmon for our orca whales. We have collapsing species, and so I urge you to support some of the tribal initiatives. Lumlumps, thank you.
Okay, feel a little awkward cutting in front of DR on this one. You don't do that to elders in Indian country, so, but I'm going to do that because I think it fits really well as a preamble to what DR is going to show everybody. I'm going to focus a lot on natural resources, and I'm going to really talk maybe a little bit about the values in the way that we approach natural resources and natural resource management, which in and itself is just an interesting way to, I guess, define the natural world around us as a resource, right, and a group or a bundle of resources. And it's just maybe a difference in the way that we think about the world and what drives Indian people and Indian country, and in particular for us, the Coeur tribe, is definitely not the way that we think about it. Normally, the way I do it is I'll tell a coyote story. I grew up on coyote stories. If you guys have ever had the luxury and privilege of hearing coyote stories, they're so fun. If you haven't, it's a lot like watching, the old days, when you had to sit and watch Saturday morning cartoons and watch Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. It was a lot like that, but it was in the form of storytelling. It was really fun growing up and hearing a lot of these stories. Which really centered around the animals and the animal peoples prior to human contact or human, whether it's tribal or not, human intervention into this world around us. And so it's stories about these characters like Coyote in particular, who's the primary character in all of our stories, as he goes about his life. And Coyote in particular is a goofball. I always liken him to Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean, and just a goofball character who's always out to try to do something selfish. He's trying to get something, trying to scheme, trying to plot, trying to do something, and ultimately almost always fails at that and becomes an example for all of us of what not to do. And in the process, we get to hear about it and laugh and joke and have a good time. But there are times, though, where Coyote actually puts the selfishness aside, and he ends up, doing something right, doing something good, doing something righteous for all the animal peoples, and good things come out of that. And one of the great examples of that is the creation story and how all the Indian tribes got here, where there was a monster that was gobbling up all the animals, and Coyote came in and rescued all the animals by defeating the monster, and then using parts of that monster to create all the Indian tribes in the region. And it's a good example, right? So Coyote put himself on the line, helped all the other animals, and what we got out of that were all the local tribes. And so you can think about growing up and hearing hearing these stories over and over and over and over. They're super incredible. If you haven't heard those stories, please find a way to hear some of those stories. I wish I had time to tell one. But what's interesting about that, though, and I didn't think much about this until we had reintroduced canoes onto our lake for the first time in over 100 years, and we're talking about 8-9 years ago. And I had picked up one of our main elders who's passed on now, Felix Aripa, and we're driving down to go to the canoe races or to the event for the canoes. And he's so excited. He's really excited. He was the one that was telling us so much over and over and over about these canoes and how special they were, how pertinent they were to the Coeur d'Alene tribe and our culture and our people. And we have a phrase now that we've engraved into some of the canoes that says "before the horse," and that came from Felix, where he said, "Before the horse, we were a canoe people. This is how we managed around our country." And so he was really excited, telling me now we have to do canoe races, and telling me as though it was my responsibility. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to have to do all that sort of stuff. But anyway, we came around a corner and we saw a coyote run across the road, and Felix looked at him and he said, "Oh, look, there goes Coyote. There goes Smee-you. I wonder what he's up to. He's probably up to no good. He's probably looking for a woman or something like that." And I chuckled and I laughed and I said, "Yeah, he's probably out looking for something like that." And we had a good time anyway. And I didn't think much about it until later on when I was talking to some kids about coyotes, and they were non-native kids in this particular one, and they started asking really practical questions about, how can that be? How can coyotes talk? How can they change shapes? How can they do this? How can they do that? And they're questions that I never asked growing up. So I really started thinking about that. I was like, I really don't have answers, because those are great practical questions. But it's because the meaning and the purpose of the stories are different than the way that a lot of the Western world thinks about that. And it brought me back to that time when I was with Felix, and he said that. And you think about growing up and hearing these stories over and over and over and over, how that's going to brainwash you and impact you and make you think about these kinds of things, to the point where if you see a coyote cross the road, you don't see a coyote cross the road, you see the coyote cross the road. And that's exactly what Felix had did for me. And I didn't even question it. Again, he said, "Oh, there goes Coyote." And I knew he wasn't talking about a coyote. I knew which coyote he was talking about. And we had a great time. But I thought about that and about how brainwashed I was, and I didn't even know it. But what it made me really think about, though, is how that leads to the way that you think about what we refer to as natural resources today, but really are elements in the world in the same way that human beings are, right? These if you hear these stories over and over and over and over, suddenly these elements of the natural world don't become resources or objects anymore. They start to become people, and not a coyote, but the coyote. And you start thinking about how then that changes the way that you interact. So if you have to go, for example, and for your own livelihood, take a coyote and take a coyote's life, how difficult that's going to be and how much more responsible you're going to be when you do that. That you're going to do things like say, oh, you only take it when you need to, and when you do take it, use every part of it. Don't let any of it go to waste, because this is not an easy decision to do. This is not something that should be taken lightly, because it's not a coyote, it's coyote. And you start thinking about how then that changes the way that you think about and manage every element, every animal that we hear in these stories, whether we're talking about crane or salmon or grizzly bear, and how all those things start to become people in your hearts and in your minds and the way that you think about that, to the degree that for so many Indian people and Indian tribes, and for sure for us as Coeur d'Alene people, we look at these elements and these animals in particular, and we don't refer to them as creatures or resources. We refer to them as peoples. We're talking about land peoples. We talk about the fish as being water peoples. And we talk about them as being the first peoples on this planet and in this area before human beings were here. And it really then changes the way that you perceive the world, how you approach it, how you manage it. So you've heard things probably like 7 generations. It starts to really impact those kinds of things, those kinds of concepts, become from this idea and this concept of these stories telling us that these elements are out there, but they're important. They have a right in the same way that a human being would have a right. But they also position us as human beings that tell us we're a part of this greater ecology. We're not here as something that's outside of that, and we don't look at it as something that should be taken in terms of an extraction resource type of a perspective, but really it should be respected. And if there is some give and take, it's reciprocal, and we shouldn't do things like take more than what we need, and we should be very responsible with the way that we do that. And so that impacts the way that the Coeur d'Alene tribe and a lot of tribes really manage resources moving forward. And for us, like I mentioned, Coeur d'Alene Lake, if you don't know, major Superfund site, it does cross over here into Washington, some of the contaminants, and that's important. And we're trying to lead the charge over there to protect lake cleanup, water cleanup, to make sure that everything is taken care of and managed in a way that protects the environment, including things that come downstream here into Washington. We have very strong Washington ties. We view this as also not just Spokane territory, but Coeur d'Alene tribal territory. I think because of the name Spokane, Coeur d'Alenes often get lost in that. But this is also Coeur d'Alene tribal territory, traditionally speaking. And so we have a vast interest in here, especially as we start thinking about salmon reintroduction. We look at Hangman Creek in particular, and some of the major sediment loading and stuff that comes in from agricultural use. And we want to figure out how to fix those kinds of issues. It's a major issue in Washington that also impacts us in our current reservation in Idaho. So those are important issues for us, and we take that approach of, again, not just staying back and not being a part of the system. We are a part of the system, but let's do it in a very sustainable and good way for all of our future generations. Thank you.
Is this one still on? Good morning again. My name's DR Michel. I'm a citizen of the Lakes, Colville Bands of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. I've been the executive director of the Upper Columbia United Tribes for going on 17 years now. UCUT takes a proactive and collaborative and science-based approach to promoting fish, water, wildlife, diverse habitat, and tribal culture in the Northwest. We provide a common voice for our region through the collaboration of the UCUT tribes, the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, the Kalispel Tribe of Indians, the Kootenai Tribe of Idaho, and the Spokane Tribe of Indians. We work for nearly 15,000 tribal citizens. Together we manage and influence 2 million acres of reservation land and influence at least 14 million acres of Aboriginal territories, 500 miles of waterways, 40 interior lakes, 30 dams and reservoirs. Our mission statement is to unite the Upper Columbia River tribes for the protection, preservation, and enhancement of treaty, executive order rights, sovereignty, culture, fish, water, wildlife, habitat, and other interests and issues of common concern in our respective territories through a structured process of cooperation and coordination for the benefit of all. And I think that's a very important part of our mission statement. What we do as tribes don't just benefit the tribes, it benefits all of us, and that's how we look at these issues and continue to move them forward. And throughout the years, we've been, by the folks in charge of the systems, the power and the floods, we've been kind of programmed to think that power and flood risk management is a benefit and salmon and natural resources is a cost. So it's a benefit to produce power, but it's a cost to produce a salmon. And we need to change that narrative. There's economic opportunities in bringing the salmon home, and the tribe did some economic evaluations, which was hard for us to kind of put an economic value on something that the Creator gave us. But to see, to move those issues along, we felt it was important that we showed the economic opportunities and values, because that seems to be what drives society or us now. And so we did that, and it shows that the value annually of ecosystem services is $190 billion. And the ones that they like to brag about and say makes us all the money is the hydropower. That's a value of $3.3 billion per year. So you can see the difference in the economics, and we're not asking to sway that clear back the other direction. We're just looking for a happy medium where we can have inexpensive power, we can have flood risk management, and we can have our salmon back. We can have those natural resource issues. We can continue to have those ties and those cultural ties to the river and to the system. So I want to share with you today, it's about a 12-minute video that talks about UCUT and a little bit about each of the member tribes and how that connection and how we work together again to benefit all. So I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
Fish were the main staple, the main diet for our people for thousands of years. But it also was an opportunity for us to engage with other tribes in the area as well. And it really wasn't until the dams were put in place that blocked the runs from coming up into our location that really made it challenging for us.
The history of the Kootenai Tribe of Idaho, our oral history tells us we have a covenant with the Creator. It says, as long as you take care of this land will in turn take care of you. And of course, we like the benefits that the dams bring, but the dam does bring issues. We realized the sturgeon were in decline.
The impacts of hydropower aren't just on the river. It's in the margins, it's in the mountains, it's on the people. Both salmon and resident fish are the fundamental protein resource for the Kalispel people. And so what happens when that's gone, right? You start to have secondary and tertiary impacts.
With the construction of Grand Coulee Dam, it changed everything about the river. It blocked the salmon, it changed our way of life.
The Colville tribes, we are river people, and losing those salmon for the amount of time that we have has made us incomplete.
The way we eat, the way we gather, the way we practice culture and ceremonies. So it changed. It was life-changing to lose the salmon.
You hear some of the stories about when that happened. The tribes weren't informed, weren't let know. When the salmon didn't show up that first year, thought they'd done something wrong, thought that they were being punished for something.
We are the people of the Upper
The Upper Columbia United Tribes is a 5-tribe organization. We're in the blocked area above Grand Coulee, and it's the Kalispel Tribe, the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, Kootenai Tribe of Idaho, the Spokane Tribe, and the Cobble Tribe. And most of what we do is working on mitigation issues around the impacts of the Columbia River hydro system.
UCUT's kind of been that central location then where some of our brightest, best and brightest have come together to figure out, okay, if we're going to reintroduce salmon, what is that going to look like? How is that going to be?
Somewhere along the line, we realized that if we can get rid of the stuff that we don't agree on and just focus on the things that we do agree on, we can get a lot of things done.
You look around the basin in the Upper Columbia and you see the tribes at the forefront of resource restoration, hydropower mitigation, working really strongly with our collaborating agencies.
Sido Fish and Game, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, BC Ministries, BC Hydro, Bonneville Power Administration, Army Corps of Engineers, United States Fish and Wildlife Service, Idaho Fish and Game, so many different entities, an alphabet soup of, at these agencies.
And at first it was a fight, and then it became a collaboration. And now we have a web of partners that are helping us achieve the vision that our tribe set forth decades ago.
I think for a long time people were kind of thinking that it was a choice between salmon or energy. Everybody's realizing, especially with reintroduction, that you can have both.
For the benefit of all is a very important part of who we are as a tribal people. The tribes aren't going to be the only ones that benefit from fish passage.
I know in this room, the room is set up ultimately for us to be able to rear young fish, young salmon in particular, so that we can be able to ultimately pit tag them and track them as they head down to the system all the way out to the ocean and hopefully come back. Last year we had our very first adult return from the ocean. That was really exciting, and we had a big ceremony when we put them back in the waters in the blocked area.
Those ceremonial releases have been just beautiful. We had one of our elders actually release a salmon at Kettle Falls, and he was there for the ceremony of tears as a child. And so to see salmon returning back to the falls was actually a very beautiful, very moving moment.
We have a facility here in Box Canyon that has an upstream passage facility that's in operation. We're working with the Corps of Engineers and the Bonneville Power Administration for final design and construction of upstream fish passage facilities at Albany Falls Dam. The goal's restoration of a trust resource like bull trout for the Kalispel tribe.
What we have in these tanks behind us are Kootenai River white sturgeon. We have the brood stock. We're in the middle of spawning right now. So we have a lot of the big mamas in the tanks right now. The tribe has been doing extensive habitat rehabilitation work. And so part of that is fixing side channels that have been deteriorated and making them viable again. And so that allows for other fish to go in there and rear and raise and have a place to hide and live.
Who we do this for is my great-granddaughter.
We want our children, our grandchildren to be able to enjoy some of those same societal factors that we saw thousands of years ago.
We've had our nose at the grindstone for work, and now we're up the mountain quite a ways. We can finally take a look and see how far we've come. And we've come so far. It's such a wonderful time to be able to create life.
And for the Spokane Tribe, we believe that when the salmon return, that will bring healing to our people. Hopefully someday we're able to see 20,000 fish come home, or 50,000.
To be able to see those salmon rippling in the water when we turn them loose for those cultural and educational releases, to see them swimming in those waters after 80 years, it's just an amazing feeling. And to know that it can happen, and to know that you was a part of it. This is an opportunity again for us to heal, for us to fill that void in some of those folks who I've talked to since those releases, and that reconnection has changed their life, who they are, and has helped bring them back, has helped bring them out of that. So it's more than, it's more than just a salmon. It's who we are, and who we need to continue to be, and we will. But it will be better when the salmon are home.
Our people could not imagine life at one time without the salmon, but now we are seeing them again. And that means we gotta pray harder, together, because they're listening to us.
I want to thank our presenters today for sharing some of the issues that our tribal communities, our tribal members here in the urban areas are facing. And when it comes to action and calls to action, it's really being supportive of the tribal efforts and realizing, they mentioned the alphabet soup of not only jurisdictional issues and agencies, that we work with on every single issue that affects our communities. And so it's fighting with us, supporting the fights. Our ancestors have fought along battles for us to be here, for us to sit here with you today. And in our lifetime, we've seen some amazing changes, and we've fought some hard battles. In our own lifetime, the year before I was born, it was illegal to practice our religion. And so all of our efforts, the fact that our languages have survived are because of the fights of our ancestors, and the animals, our relatives that we get behind. Salmon are some of the most resilient species. And when we look at the life of the salmon, and we look at how hard they fight as well to be back to our homelands and to our home waters, and they're jumping and they're hitting these dams, and they're still fighting. And so we, as Indigenous people, we need to fight as hard as they do to protect our future generations. In my lifetime, I hope that, my daughter and my children are able to see and harvest some of these animals and harvest, our relatives that are coming home. Also, the representation in our state government and our state agencies, in leadership positions is so important, and we've seen a lot of progress because we actually are seeing some tribal representatives in our government system, and so we have to continue that and support those efforts because they not only fight for their tribes and their districts, but all tribes in our states, and not just our states, across the borders, because we're looking at issues that are upstream and downstream from us, and working together. We see a lot of our most successful work is when we collaborate together, and I think that video points it out beautifully. On the transportation issues, we have isolated communities. We have, especially on the Colville Reservation, communities only accessible, their main routes are ferry transportation. And we see some of these issues affect our communities when it comes to emergency situations and climate change and fires, and the ability for first responders to reach our communities. It is and continues to be a dire issue, and so we want to keep our eyes on those transportation issues. From the Spokane and Yakima reservations, the impacts to here in Spokane from transportation include the threat of nuclear waste coming through our community. So we heard that in the last year, where Spokane leadership has been concerned about some of the waste traveling through Spokane from Hanford, but also not aware of the waste that's coming through from the Spokane reservation. Some of the sites we talk about, the Superfund sites, they've created toxins in our community that are never going to go away. We look at the half-lives, hundreds of thousands of years of some of the toxins that we're facing, and perpetual water treatment on the Spokane reservation for our Superfund site. So that means, a nonstop waste stream that will be coming through Spokane, and we have to look at where that waste is going, and it's impacting our relatives in the Southwest, at the Four Corners region. And so it's expanding our view about how our issues here also impact other communities, and making sure that our fights don't push it downstream or push it to another community, that we create solutions that benefit everyone, not just in our own districts. And the tribal consultation process. Margo listed a lot of issues that have to do with jurisdictions, but it's also these treaty right obligations for agencies to consult with tribes, and being supportive and more resources to our tribes to address all of these agencies and every single project that impacts our community. But making sure that not only the leadership is consulted, but the community members also, that we see a lot of the issues that, that decisions can't be made without us, because what happens is, it's our people that are buried on those lands. It's our people that these issues will impact forever, our children, and there are no new reservations being built. So when we see these, impacts, these are things that our future generations are going to have to deal with. And, the dams that are being relicensed, some of these decisions happen once in a lifetime. And so they're very, very important for tribes to have the adequate resources to address and to hold the agencies accountable for our future generations. So I'm really excited to hear from the next panel from the youth, because we value not only our elders' perspective, but also our youth and the issues that they feel that are important. We again want to just thank you for being here, and especially thank our speakers that brought to you some of our tribal language, because I know that that's another issue that heavily weighs on our people as we see some of our elders pass. Through the COVID epidemic, we saw major impacts, and we could see those health disparities play out in our tribal communities. Every single tribal community that has nuclear facilities, we are seeing record rates of death because of our people already had impacted health and immune systems. And our relatives on the Yakima reservation, they were getting up to 4 funerals a day down there. And our tribal, our medicine people, they were being very stretched thin. Our language speakers, there's a point on the Spokane reservation, we had less than 10 fluent speakers. And so every effort and all of our energy needs to be directed towards saving that language, because with that comes our worldview. With that, not only, it's something we teach our youth, but it also reflects our values. And the creation stories that we were taught that we need to continue to pass down, the ceremonies. We're not only fighting for the salmon to come back, but also the language, the ceremonies, the gatherings, the celebrations that came along with that. That's part of those canoe journeys. And so we see that and invite you to participate in those efforts, invite you to witness some of these events in our community. So if you see something, if you see powwows, if you see canoe journeys, please come and attend, support, witness, and share that with your families and your relatives, your friends. So thanks again for your time this morning, and we'll be here for questions. So thank you.